As I move into what I want to talk about today, when I was growing up, my mom was a musician, and when people would shout in church, and we were Baptists coming up, so it was just one of them things where they would, you know, how the benches would move, and they would shout hard. They call it a Baptist fit today, but they would shout so hard you'd have to give them smelling salts to get them up. Like, what's wrong with you? I always ask my mom, I say, well, why when people shout, they say, thank you, Jesus? Why everybody that shouted at that time, and that's all I could remember, people be lifting hands and be like, thank you. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I learned later what that really meant. In our text, do y'all mind if we take a quick trip for about 16 minutes? Listen to this. In our text, David was on an 8-mile journey from the city of Baal to Jerusalem, and that's the backdrop for what we're talking about today. And if you don't mind, if we look at this, he was to go to the city of Kiriath Jearim to recover the Ark of the Covenant, which had been apprehended by the Philistines about 80 years prior and had been under the guard in the house of Abinadab for 20 years. So David, being a new king, his first assignment, one of his first assignments, he had a burden on him to bring the Ark of the Covenant, which represents the presence of God, to bring the Ark of God back to the city where it belonged. He said, let's get it out of where it is and let's take it back to the city of David, which was Jerusalem. Amen. And on the way, a few things happened. He ran into some challenges. How many people have run into challenges as you're serving God? And all of us are serving God. I mean, even when you're at work and when you're at play, because we're Christians, everything we do is in service to God. And one of the great arenas that the devil likes to work in is to bring about confusion as we are serving God. And there are three little things I want to talk about on this road to Thanksgiving. The first thing happened is that David and his camp encountered a bump in the road. Somebody said it with me, a bump in the road. David had gone to get the ark, and the Levitical law told us and mandated that only the sons of Levi were to handle the Ark of the Covenant, and they were to hold it with their hands, and as they moved these 8 miles back to the capital city. But somewhere along the line, they got in their heads, they were going to make it quick and a little convenient. They put the Ark of the Covenant on what they call a new cart. So basically, they wanted to roll it into the city. I'm sure it was easier. I'm sure it was quicker. So as the oxen are pulling the presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant, into the city or out of the city onto where they were going, the oxen stumbled and fell on a bump in the road. How many people have ever had a bump in the road? I have some rims on my car, and I think it's the worst thing I ever did, because we have so many potholes here in Dallas and in Plano and in North Texas, and you hit one the right way, those rims are gone. And the factory wheels don't behave like aftermarket wheels. And that's what happens sometimes in our life. We hit a bump in the road. Some of us in our ministries, we hit a bump in a road. We hit a curb. Somebody say, I hit a snag every once in a while. Yes, something happens that you did not expect. Sometimes on our journey with God, we run into debris that's in the road. So debris being some things that has happened in our past. Debris being some things that some people around us has just dropped in our path. And it seems to get us away from the journey. It distracts us from our course. And I'm here to tell you that when you're working for God, you are going to encounter some drama and some damage along the way. But what had happened, I got to talk about what had happened was this cart that was rolling, the Ark of the Covenant that was rolling on this cart, when the oxen slipped and when it hit the bump in the road, the Ark of the Covenant slipped. And it began to, somebody say, shift. I like to have y'all talk back to me. It began to shift. And as it shifted, Uzzah put his hand out to try to keep it from falling off the cart, thinking that he was doing what the right thing. I mean, your reflex is if you see something falling, what do? But God's Levitical law says, stay in your lane. All right. And Pastor, that's hard for us church folks to stay in our lane because we pay our tithes. We give our service. Or we have this good excuse, Elder Bowes, I don't have to be here. And I'm here to tell you that don't mean that you should get out of your lane because of any of those three excuses. God has certain things set up so that we can be blessed by our obedience. Sometimes a shifting will occur when we are hitting a bump in the road and you can get off balance. And I'm going somewhere with this. God may change, add, or take away from your assignment. Pastor has been training the staff all the time. But there was one specific thing when we were talking about having our troops that follow our leadership, and he's teaching us leadership, that when they get off course, and let me make sure I read this right. He says sometimes it's necessary to retrain, reassign, or replace. Y'all say that with me. Retrain, reassign, or replace. So he gave us a antidote to how do you get people to follow you and follow the vision of the house. And he didn't say replace the first time. He said retrain. Give them another time. And if they can't get that right, take them somewhere else. And if they can't, just replace and move to another direction. Sometimes God does that with us. He retrains us through the word of God. Sometimes he reassigns the assignment that he has for us. And then sometimes he says, you know what? You have spent your time. That happens in a shifting. The great thing about the atmosphere of God is that there is a shifting. That's why we have seasons from December to March is what? Winter. And from March to June is spring. And then there's a shift from June to September, and from September on through the late parts of November, we are in. See, God's, even in his divine assignment about the earth, was about shifting. You've got to be able to move and being able to handle, somebody say change. And that's the thing that gets us sometimes. Well, I always sit in this seat. Make the choir mad. That's my song. I always sing that song. I've always been over this particular area in the church, and now pastor done moved me. Sometimes we hit a bump in the road. Number two, I see that sometimes we come to a fork in the road. Somebody say a fork in the road. Have you ever came to a detour? Your GPS told you where to go, but the GPS had not considered that there was new construction in front of you. And sometimes we come to a fork in the road, and when you ever come to a fork in the road, somebody say, I have to make a decision. And sometimes it's a quick decision. This fork in the road happened at Nation's threshing floor. And basically, there was a place where they harvested the grain and separated the good grain from the bad grain. And this happened to be the fork in the road for David as he's traveling, trying to finish his assignment that God has for him. He hit a fork in the road because what had happened was his boy died. And David's not understanding, like, hey, well, God, we're trying to do what you want me to do. And I'm going through this. Somebody in this house has said that. Lord, I live right and I'm going through. I could have cussed him out and I did not. I decided to do the right thing and I'm still going through drama. God, sometimes we come to a fork in the road and we have to make a split decision. God has a track that's designed specifically for us as we're on this road. Now we see that David not only was scared of God, but he was angry because it looked like God was being too technical. on this road? God, why do you want every I dotted? And why do you need every T crossed? You're just asking me for too much. You could have, why did you let him die? You're asking too much of me in this place. And I hear God saying that it's about the building of faith. Someone say the building of faith. Because the building of faith is the beginning of favor. And he said faith was designed, watch this, faith was designed to be tested, not rested. See, a lot of times as Christians, we rest our faith until we need it. But God only gave you faith so it could be tested. So you will come to a fork in the road sometimes. And it takes that faith so that you can please God by making that decision. But David, in this moment, quit. I went through something in my life, and I did not want to write music. I didn't want to preach. I didn't want to play. I didn't want to do anything. Some could say I quit because of what I was in my feelings. Anybody ever been in their feelings? Amen. Yes. David was in his feelings. And he quit on God. He said, I can't take this. This assignment is too great. I thought I was serving you. I thought I was doing the right thing. And now I got to go down this particular road. He said, I quit. So the Bible says that he just dropped off the Ark of the Covenant. This is too much. Obed-Edom, I'm going to let you have that. You have that burden, and I'm going to go on back over here and do what I know to do best. And then word got back around to David as he's back in the city, and it said that Obed-Edom is blessed. Everything around him is blessed. His dog is blessed. His hogs are blessed. His roaches, everything around him is blessed. And ain't it funny that somebody's trash can be somebody else's treasure? Ain't it funny that somebody else's burden can become somebody else's blessing? Oh, I know I'm almost done here, and I got to get out of your way. So David heard about the blessing. He said, I got to go back. See, my daddy was a big Red Fox fan, so we grew up watching Sanford and Son. And there was an episode where the man says, I want my daddy's records back. Y'all remember that? I want my daddy's records back. I hear David telling the people, I need the Ark of the Covenant back because that blessing was, watch this, it was designed for me. But I couldn't take the process on the road. So I dropped it off and I quit. And I hear God telling us here at this church, sometimes you got to continue the assignment. There are times that you can't quit even though it's hard. Sometimes you can't quit just because you don't understand, somebody say, the process. I'm almost done here. I'm trying to get through this thing real quick. For Pastor, get that, what's that thing they use on Apollo? Pastor. And the third and final thing I want to say, we had a bump in the road, then we discovered a fork in the road, and it all led to a dance on the road. Somebody say a dance. David decided, I'm going to go back to Obed-Edom, and I'm going to do what God has told me to do. I think that David had figured out that God's favor chases faith. Can you say that with me? His favor chases faith. So without the faith that I can get this done, then the blessings that are supposed to trail behind it don't happen. So he decided, I'm going to go back and finish. The Bible talks about that he who has begun a good work will perform. God don't ever start something and don't finish it. That be us. Oh, I'll get to it later. Y'all put it in your little phones and the calendar, and we never get back to it. Pastor say we need to do this. We'll get to that later. But God ain't that kind. And when he starts a process, someone says he finishes it. And because the blessing is in finishing the assignment, because God has a reward. And I'm quickly closing here. But David said, let me go back and do what I was assigned. So he went back and he got the Ark of the Covenant. And I believe he just Indian gave. He just snatched it like, you know what? we're about to go. I found out something interesting last night as I was looking at this again, and it said that he had about 30,000 people with him on the road. 30,000 people. Now, if you turned on Channel 8 right now, you may see that many people lined up on the streets for the Macy's what? Thanksgiving parade. David had Thanksgiving already figured out about having a parade. So as they're going down, the Bible says it didn't take them to walk but 6 paces, and the Spirit of God hit the streets. And they said David began to worship God, and the 30,000 people began to play and sing and worship, and we see a great orchestration of Thanksgiving on this road. David had married the king's daughter, who was Saul before him, and he married her, and her name was Micah. And Micah is busy being first lady. No pun intended. No. That's the greatest first lady ever. I tell people that all the time. She really is. And the hardest working one I've ever seen in my life. Good Lord. Slow down, first lady. But she got that. Micah, she was kind of teed off with David. She was like, you don't look like the king. You're not behaving like the king. Basically, you are embarrassing the throne that my daddy, the custom. We don't act like this. Somebody say, we don't act. In the other church I was at, we don't act like this. Why are y'all thanking and praising and worshiping so hard? It don't take all that. And I can hear David saying, Micah, if you had been through what? Y'all, if you've been through some of the stuff I went through, you would be a little bit undignified too. And when people ask me about my praise these days, I'm talking about Greg. If you had gone through some of the things and God has now brought me out, I have a reason to go into a worship. I have a reason to have my heart full of thanksgiving. Real quick, Jesus even had to say thank you. And I won't go into the text, but John 17:4, he was basically saying, God, thank you. I've given you the glory because you allowed me to complete my assignment. And Matthew 26:26, he thanked God for the ability and the opportunity to sacrifice his life for the world. And if Jesus can say thank you, some of us ought to be able to lift our puny hands up and worship God and say, thank you. You've done some things for me that I could not do for myself. And I want to say thank you. So as I close, how do I say this? God and the devil sat down to play a game of chess. And God made his first move, and he moved his pawn, and he allowed Adam and Eve to be in the garden. The devil made his move. He moved his pawn and said, you know what, I'm going to cause Adam and Eve to disobey God, and we see sin in the garden. God said, okay, I'm going to move my next pawn, and he moved Noah to build an ark. The devil said, I'm going to counter that move, and I'm going to allow Moses to be out of his right mind and to be drunk on the eve of reconstruction. And then God says, well, let me move my rook and cause Moses to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. And just like the devil, he moved his rook and had Moses to get mad and strike the rock. So they're in the midst of an intense battle. And God says, I have another rook. And he moved it, and he called prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah. And the devil moved his rook. He says, well, I'm just going to have all the prophets stoned. And we go on through this chess match. And for 400 years, God didn't make a move. 400 years, he just sat there looking. And then, after 400 years, he says, I'm getting ready to move my king. So he let this king named Jesus be born of a Virgin Mary in Bethlehem. And this king opened up blinded eyes. And this king unstopped deaf ears. And this king fed the 5,000. And this king raised the dead. But on Friday, devil said, I'm going to make my move. And he said, I'm going to take your king. They're going to put him on the cross and they're going to lie on him and they're going to whoop him and they're going to accuse him of some stuff he didn't do. And they put our king in the grave and then they sealed the tomb. And the devil looked God straight in the face and said, check. I got your king. Check. Game is over. Check. And then the God we serve looked at the devil square in the face. He said, but I ain't made my last move yet. They say he looked at the chessboard all night Friday night. And they say he looked at the chessboard all day on Saturday. And they said he was still looking at it on Sunday morning, Pastor. And then God looked at the devil and said, I'm ready to make my last move. And the Bible goes on to tell us, and not the chess match, but the Bible declares that on that Sunday morning, God made the check move, and he rose Jesus from the grave. And then God looked at the devil and said, checkmate. Checkmate, I got you. You thought you had me, but you don't have me. So I've come to let you know that if you don't feel like you have a reason to worship God and to be thankful, that's the reason to be thankful. Now, as I walk to my seat, now I understand why when I see God's hands on me, I got to say thank you like the old ladies used to do. When I see God keeping me, I got to say thank you. When I see God protecting me, I have to say thank you. Thank you.